Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining me at this special edition of the Mother Della Morte Show. And I know everybody's filing in, so come on in, say hello. We've got some really, really cool guests here tonight, and I'm really excited for you guys to meet them. And like most of us, they hold regular jobs throughout the week. But however, when the weekend starts, the cemetery work begins. Now, what started out as an interest in gravestone recovery and gravestone conservation and the preservation of local history has blossomed into a passion for saving abandoned cemeteries through the process of discovery, recovery, and restoration for the future generations to enjoy and learn from. So join me in welcoming Greg Duhamel and Johnelle Bergeron, cemetery conservationists. They are located in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, and they head the Woonsocket Historical Cemetery Volunteers and are partnered with the Blackstone Valley Historical Society's River Road and Cemetery Group. So welcome.
Hi.
Greg and Johnelle, we are so glad to have you here, and
Thank
thank
you
you
for
so much
having us.
for joining us.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us here.
Well, I know we're waiting for a lot of our crowd to get in here, and they should start shuffling in here very, very soon. But go ahead and just give us a little introduction, kind of like what you guys do, and how you got into this.
We basically take care of old abandoned cemeteries. We do everything from clearing brush to finding stones that are beneath the earth, bringing them back up, cleaning them off, repairing them if they need repairs. Greg does a lot of research on these families that are in these cemeteries. He's very, very good with history. And that's pretty much what we do. And strangely enough, we actually got involved through a pastor, which is a little strange because neither of us are really religious. But yeah, we ended up meeting a pastor online actually, and we went out with him once, and it turned to a passion at that point, I would say. Immediately.
I love.
Yeah.
Well, I think what you guys do is just absolutely amazing, and I think especially in the culture that we're kind of all living through now, and we're all living through amazing times, but I think that the importance of history really, really needs to be preserved. So, I personally really appreciate what you guys are doing. And I know all of our tapophile friends here, the ones that really enjoy cemeteries and enjoy the histories behind cemeteries and graveyards. And, just there's so much. I actually did a feed not too long ago, and it was actually about a mausoleum that is rumored to be a time machine. But, one of the correlations that I made is that really all graveyards and cemeteries are a time machine. I mean,
Yes.
Yeah,
they
definitely.
Yep.
they are like, what am I trying to say? Like the
They're
person.
they're each unique. They each have their own story. They each have their own. They all have their own struggles, and it's a history within itself. And if we're not preserving that, we're losing it, and we're not being able to teach it to the next generation. So it's appreciated further. And that's what's sad with the cemeteries that we come in contact with.
We found like mattresses, cars in cemeteries, main sets, just like mountains of trash, like stuff that you should never be in a cemetery, and stones that you can tell were blatantly broken. It wasn't an accident, things that were purposely destroyed. And it's kind of sad because I don't know, I've always respected the deceased, people that came before us. I don't really understand how people could vandalize a cemetery.
Well, personally, I think it's probably just ignorance and misunderstanding personally. But yeah, I have to agree with you. It always breaks my heart when I see, a cemetery that's either for whatever reason, whether it was a family plot and there's just not any family anymore, or, what have you. I mean, I imagine there's hundreds of stories as to why a particular cemetery or graveyard is at some point considered abandoned. What is one of your most interesting finds, I should say, or restorations?
Most interesting.
It's kind of tough.
We when we deal with a lot of older, when it gets further back in time, it's more interesting. you never know what you're going to find. You never know what you're going to discover, whether it's an inscription on a gravestone or it's an artifact that you wouldn't expect. We've come across old horse carriage parts. We've come across old bottles. We've come across old buttons, old you name it. You just never know what you're gonna find, and especially around the area around the cemetery itself, it contains a lot of history and artifacts too. We don't necessarily go digging for artifacts and looking for discoveries. What we look for is anybody that's not marked and not really known. Any history that we can bring to the table and teach to somebody that never knew this history before, introduce those type of stories to people. That's what we treasure, and that's the most interesting thing we're able to find, whether it's family that we run into doing this work or bringing a family member to an ancestor's grave that they never knew was buried there. Those are the treasures that we do this for.
Well, and I think you guys do an absolutely fantastic job. Do we want to show some of the pictures of some of the restoration work that you guys have done? Sure. Because now my understanding, and it could just be me, it could just be my ignorance, but there are different types of restoration, correct? I mean, I know like there's what some call sympathetic restoration, which that could you explain that, because it seems like you guys' restoration goes a wee bit further, where it's actually repairing the headstones, and uncovering the brush and vegetation and things like that from around it. And from what I understand with more of the sympathetic is they kind of just, I don't want to say let it go, but they do let it return back to nature somewhat.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Certain restorations we do, they are full restorations where we go in there, clear out all the invasive species of plant life. We like to conserve as much as we can that was there when burials were taking place before it was abandoned. Further than that, sympathetic restoration could mean many different things depending on who you're speaking to. But we go in there and we try to recover whatever we can, and we try to conserve what we can without intruding the lands as it is. We don't want to alter the landscape. We want to teach people that there is a cemetery here. So sympathetic restoration, we do go in it very carefully. We're careful on what our surroundings are, what we're going to encounter. Old graves lead to old sunken grave shafts, so you got to be extremely careful where you're digging or where you're standing. Gravestones can wobble, very fragile, so you got to be careful of all that stuff. So that could be sympathetic restoration. We're very careful what we're doing, but we do it out of the kindness of our hearts more than anything.
When it comes down to like removing like brush and stuff like that, like you said, we try to keep whatever plants would have been there like originally as best of our knowledge, and we gotta get rid of stuff like poison ivy and things like that. One of the cemeteries that we did, it was 3.5 acres, and it was literally all poison ivy. You couldn't tell it was a cemetery from the street. But I had poison ivy for months because of this, but we had to clear it out, otherwise it wouldn't be accessible for anybody.
And it'll just come back. If we don't maintain it, it'll just keep coming back, and it'll look the same way when we first walked in. And we don't want to leave cemeteries looking like that. We want to be able to walk away for a length of time and be able to step back and be like, wow, look at the beauty, and watch other people step up to the table and take responsibility for these cemeteries too. They are all of our cemeteries if they're abandoned.
Well, I absolutely agree. And that's one of the things I was going to ask you. Once you go in there and you do these restorations, do you normally seem to have people that come in and like down here where I'm at, we have a lot of groups that adopt cemeteries to handle the maintenance, because again, for whatever reason, maybe it's a family plot and there's no longer family in this area or what have you. Is that normally how you guys kind of like hand it off?
Yeah, kind of. We have some different volunteers. This past year, because of COVID, it wasn't like the season before that. We had a lot more volunteers the season prior. So right now it is a kind of a smaller group that goes out, and we kind of all take care of like different cemeteries in our area. But we usually go in like a big group effort at first to get them as, as best as we can. And then we'll try to upkeep particular ones, kind of assign them to other members that are in a group.
Rhode Island, like your area too. Rhode Island has many different groups set up. So we're a group. We organize in Woonsocket, and there's other groups in Lincoln. What we do is with the River Road site. It's we focus on all of the Blackstone Valley. There's so many different cities and towns in that area, and that circumference of land. So we could wind up in Woonsocket one week. We could be in Lincoln next weekend. We could be in Newport in 3 weeks. We just really don't know. And with so many different groups organized, so many groups are reaching out for help too. So we try to help out as much as we can in different areas in order to teach people what we know and be able to learn what they know.
Yeah, that's another important thing too. If you're interested in getting into cemetery restoration, you got to make sure you're trained by people that know what they're doing. People go in with good intentions sometimes, especially like maybe 10, 20 years ago. We find stones sometimes that are encased in just like concrete. It's going to get chiseled off. So sometimes people can go in there with good intentions and they bring the wrong tools to repair these stones, and it actually ends up being more work and causes more damage in the long run.
I can understand that, and I do want to get into that a little bit later in our talk, because I think what you guys are saying there is really important, because there are so many people that want to help, but you need to understand, especially with some of these really, really old stones, that there's a particular way that you need to go about doing that in order to preserve it. Yeah, and so that it will last, many number of years from now. Well, so how many, just out of curiosity, how many cemeteries or graveyards or burial sites are you guys up to at this point?
Too many.
Yeah, that's a tough question,
we have 17 in Woonsocket alone. There are some that are maintained by cemetery organizations that were set up prior, where they're active burials. Mm-hmm. The neglected cemeteries, we have about 13 to 12 cemeteries that are not taken care of and maintained in Woonsocket. In Rhode Island alone, they estimate there could be a cemetery within every square mile. So there's hundreds of thousands of cemeteries. It's just a matter of which one is most important to save. So within Rhode Island's history, we've seen a lot of housing development that comes in and reclaims these cemeteries where vandalism did take place, or the aging of the cemetery eventually watched gravestones toppling over and getting covered with brush, land, erosion of the land. So development has destroyed a lot of these older cemeteries that were established in the 1800s. And that's what we base our work off of. What is a top priority for us? What is most prone to damage or neglect? What is most prone to development coming in and erasing the entire landscape of the cemetery? So that's what we prioritize and how we prioritize. We're in too many to keep count, though.
I can understand, but when it's a labor of love, it's like it really doesn't matter. It could be 1,000, it could be 1,000,000, it could be 2. You know what I'm saying? As long as your heart's going into it, that's really what matters. So I think what you guys are doing is amazing. Now, I did want to ask about, and I think, like I said, I think we've got pictures. So excuse, if some of the pictures that we have may not apply to this, but one that you were talking to me about a couple of days ago that really caught my interest was the particular one of was it the Ballou and the Cook family? Yes.
This is the Elder Ballou meeting house. This was erected in the mid 1700s, early 1700s. The Cook family was one of the first families around here. The Ballou family was also another one of those families. They both organized that meeting house right there. That meeting house was one of the oldest meeting houses established in this area, the Blackstone Valley. There were many other churches and meeting houses and whatnot that went up, but this is one of the most prominent that is in our area. these people were Baptist, early settlers. They settled with they came here with Roger Williams, William Blackstone. They settled here. They established the first mills, churches, publishing companies, as you see in this picture right here. That was from the early 1900s, and this family they arrived in 1651.
Wow.
So yes, so they were here a long time. They were here from the 1600s until 1900s, and there's still family that's still alive today that is included with our River Road and Blackstone Valley cemeteries. There are family members still alive that focus on these cemeteries with us.
I actually met a cook and a blue that were married to one another when I used to be a server about a year and a half ago, and we started talking about the cemetery work, and they're like, "Oh, I'm a cook, and she was a blue." And they started telling me about it, and it was just interesting meeting people that are connected to these families. Very
well, and how I imagine, because this particular cemetery, they thought it was lost, right? I mean, you guys just stumbled across it one day. Is that my understanding?
Yes, the Zabina Cook Cemetery. That's it was right in the back of the woods. This is right down the road from where the meeting house was. There is another cemetery across the street from the meeting house. That cemetery was very well known. The Cook Cemetery was another cemetery further down the road that was completely forgotten. 1970s vandals destroyed it, completely broke every gravestone in that cemetery. One day I seen a map, 1850s. I was following what was on the map, looking for lost cemeteries. And sure enough, I stumbled upon a gravestone that was protruding out of the ground just a couple inches. I dug that out. I was able to find a name, and I basically did all the genealogical research on that name, and that name was 1830s. These are nice marble stones. These pictures right here. These are at the other Cook Cemetery. They later established from this small cemetery, and they expanded into a larger cemetery. And those repairs were from that second cemetery of the Cook family. But the earliest families to settle here.
Oh, wow. And I find it somewhat ironic that they had left, like, the Plymouth area, am I correct, or the Massachusetts area, because of religious persecution, which was the whole point of the settlement in Massachusetts to begin with.
Yes.
So I did find that somewhat ironic.
Yes, they traveled with the earlier settlers to come here. They were formed of the first abolitionists of this country, and they broke off on the Blackstone River. We're in the Blackstone Valley, and most of these families broke off and settled in their own areas, and they created their own villages. The Ballou family had a Ballou neighborhood. The Cook family had the Cook Hill. And many families like that. Roger Williams did the same thing in Providence, Rhode Island, settling land, forming the first church, forming the first schools, and they came here for religious persecution. If they stayed where they were, they would have been hung like the Salem witches.
That's so sad, but I am glad that they were able to find a place to relocate, and it sounds like you guys have some wonderful history. And like you said, you still have family that lives there even today,
Yes.
which I just find so neat.
It is.
Now you did find something. I know that you said you guys find a little of, all kinds of different things when you're cleaning out these cemeteries and trying to bring life back into the surrounding land that they are on. But there was something specific you guys ran up on at one point in some of this restoration work. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Talk about.
So we were in this one cemetery. We thought originally it was maybe like Quaker burial ground because they weren't marked graves. It was just regular, stones in the ground. If you didn't know what you're looking for, you would just think they're, rocks. So we're going to straighten out some stones, bring them back up a little bit so they're not too low on the ground so you can actually see them. And I'm just sitting there, I'm digging, and I see a little frog hop into right next to where I was, exactly where I was digging, I should say, to straighten out the stone. And thankfully I didn't put the shovel down. I noticed a frog hop in, so I picked up the frog, saved it, And then I ended up finding a really old tool. Greg showed it to an archaeologist, and he estimated it to be 7,000 years old or older based on how it's made. So yeah, it would have been used to hollow out like wood to make canoes and stuff like that.
Yeah,
That's
native
pretty
tools.
amazing.
And we have many tribes in Rhode Island that have settled here even longer than even further back than the English that came here for religious persecution. They lived amongst one another as friends, as brothers, as neighbors. The native tribes that stayed here, they lived off the land. They survived off that way. They had caves. There's native caves here, cairns. A lot of native sites. And what we try to do is we try to make communication with those tribes, and we try to bring these tools either to them, present them, or we preserve them and we keep them in our museum and put them on display and whatnot for other people to view. We have many artifacts from Woonsocket, and that's one that's really, it's in mint condition. And where we found it, it was probably an offering. It looks as if it was a native burial site. So that tool would have been placed there for their burial rites, for them to pass on in the afterlife, or whatever their belief was in the afterlife. That's what this tool was. It was an offering, and that's what that is. That's 7,000 years old. That's impressive.
That it's extremely impressive, and to be honest, the piece that you found, it is definitely like museum quality.
Yes.
I could only imagine running across something like that, and that's like a once in a lifetime find.
Yes.
But I'm glad
I
you guys
honestly felt like
found it.
Indiana Jones when I found it.
Right, with the bag of sand and
Yep. And I was even
It's
more
amazing.
surprised when we found out exactly how old it potentially could be.
We went from thinking it was a couple hundred years old to being told that this is 10 to 7,000 years old, with 7,000 looking like the prime number. And you can, if you look close enough, you can see the imprint, the thumb imprint on the handle at the bottom. And the top piece that you would be holding on the top of the hand would be the top where they would have dug out the canoe, or they would have used it sharpening flint. You could have even used it as a pestle if you needed to. Who knows what they used it for? Many different usages, I bet.
oh, absolutely, and it's almost the timeline on that is almost too much to wrap your head around, if that makes sense.
Yes,
it really is.
And it leaves a lot of questions. Leaves a lot of historical questions that should be answered. And unfortunately, because of the lack of preserving of our records, a lot of our records have been lost. Whether it was churches burning down, that could be why the Cook Cemetery its burial records were lost. Other cemeteries' burial records were probably lost because of that same thing: fires, floods, hurricanes, blizzards. Ours is a little different than the West Coast natural events, but so many different things that put these things at harm and at risk that these records no longer exist. So we have little to go by. But when we're able to put these dates on these artifacts or on these cemeteries, it gives us a whole different perspective on how old and how long these people were really here.
Yeah, it really does. And that kind of circles back around to the whole, again, the importance of preserving history, because personally, I feel like us, the human animals, we are visual and tactile creatures. And so we need that visualization much more than probably someone. Yes, there's been stories that have been passed down, for centuries and things like that. But since the very beginning of man, you have cave paintings and drawings and sculptures and things like that, which to me means that it's an integral part of who we are.
Yes,
and
yes.
It's really important, and it hurts, and I'm sure you guys feel the same way, to see when things like that are destroyed, even if it's just, we were all teenagers, we were all stupid teenagers, whether it's teenagers going in there and just, not understanding the concept of this is something that's going to go on for other generations, or if it's just somebody that's just mean.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know,
I think sometimes it's like it could be superstition too for some kids. They go in there or into a cemetery late at night, hanging out, drinking or whatever. And one kid dares another, oh, you won't break that. You're gonna get the spirit mad or whatever, stuff like that. I think some of that was probably to some stones, anyways.
Or maybe it was retaliation too.
Yeah, that's true.
When we talk about religious persecution, we brings up a lot of a lot of conflicts. Even the relationships with the native tribes and the English settlers. There was a lot of conflicts. So maybe those conflicts had a lot to do with how society or how culture views these cemeteries or these places. Even places of worship are targets nowadays, and it's destructive, and it's not good for history. It's not good for a teaching point. It's not. No child is going to learn through destruction. It never worked. It never will work.
Our kids come out with
So true.
too, actually, and they know to respect cemeteries and gravestones and everything. They've gone out with us a couple times, actually.
Well, and I was going to ask, because you guys actually taught me something that I wasn't even aware of, and like I have been playing in cemetery since I was just a wee skeleton.
Oh yeah.
I've always enjoyed them, but the markers, the difference between a marker and a headstone, and there was sometimes significance for that, right?
Yes. Yes. So a marker would have been just a crude stone. It wouldn't have had any inscriptions. We see these with native sites. We see this with Quaker sites. Quaker was a religious belief in the 1600s toward there was Quakers being hung. There's a famous Quaker that was executed for her religious beliefs in the 1600s. And there was another one executed in the 1800s. And these were some of the earlier people that used these crude field stones as their markers. So while they're clearing fields out for their farms or for their settlements, they would come across these stones as rock hunters, geologists, or whatever it may be. We see wonderful stones and we pick them up when we bring them home. That's what these people did with the field stones that they picked up. They picked it up and they were like, oh, this will be my headstone. And that's what they were buried with. No name, no nothing. Maybe it helped protect who they were. Maybe their religious beliefs told them that they were just a simpleton in the world and that they didn't want an identity. They were just another human being in the world. But these are the oldest. Those are the oldest gravestones that we could estimate, and some of these date to from the 1500s, 1600s, 1700s into the 1800s. And in the late 1700s, you start seeing slate being used, and then it moves on in progress as we see with our history. We see progress, and that's what we see with gravestones, the progress. So it went from granite stone to marble stone to bronze stone to what we see today in cemeteries, where it's big marble, nice. It's just become a commodity almost. But back in the day, it was a lot different, and I'm sure the reaction they got from the people on the outside were had a lot to do with why they were choosing the gravestones they had.
Exactly. Oh, I'm sorry. You guys are getting some feedback from me, I do believe. Let me try turning this down a little bit. Is that a little better?
That's better. I see a question on the screen. So, what the oldest cemetery we have in Woonsocket? We have we have a cemetery that could be estimated in the 1600s up till the 1700s. Some of the earliest settlers here in Woonsocket, their cemeteries date from the 1600s to the 1700s as well, with inscriptions. And that's an Arnold family. They were some of the first people to settle here, with William Blackstone, Roger Williams. We consider them the first white settlers of our area because of our connections to the Narragansett tribe. They were here a lot earlier than white folks were. So we have those respect boundaries toward each other's. There were peace treaties filed and signed throughout history in Rhode Island. So oldest cemetery, 1600s in Newport.
That's not included.
That's Rhode Island. native, yeah, native cemeteries could be, they could be thousands of years. We're finding a tool that's dated 17,000 years ago. You could just imagine how old those burials are.
7,000 to 10,000.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
absolutely amazing. Have you guys always, I mean, like, I'm sorry, we've got another question. Let's see what that it was real quick. It says, a little bit says, I have a marker on the spot where I'm going to be buried.
That is awesome. I wish I was prepared like that, to be honest. I'm going to be one of those last minute people until I die. It's what's going to go on, unfortunately.
I'll probably be late to my own funeral, to be very honest.
Yes, more than likely. I hope your spot has a nice view, though.
Well, the crypt, I tell you, it's a nice place. It's very homey. So, so have you guys like always been into cemeteries? I mean, even when you were younger?
Yeah, definitely. I've always had like weird experiences since I was a child, supernatural experiences. I've always believed in spirits because I've had experiences with them since I was probably, I think the first time I saw a ghost, I was probably about 6 or 7. So I've always been interested in the supernatural, and I started going to cemeteries probably when I was about 10 years old. Up until like the teenage years, I would go just to walk around, pay my respects, read the old gravestones and stuff like that. So I've always been drawn to it, I would definitely say.
Yeah, same here. Absolutely same here. So I know we touched on it just a couple of minutes ago. Actually, guys, we only have like 25 minutes left, but you said that, we were talking about how you guys go about actually doing the restorations and things like that. And I did want to circle back to that because, like I said, a lot of people, myself included, because there are a few small ones around here that both me and a friend of mine actually go to in the spring before things like get too snaky, and try to clean up a little bit and things like that. But as far as like restoration, what is, for the lay person, what would be the right and the wrong things to do? Like, could you give people some pointers on that?
Absolutely. We follow a guideline. It's a set of standards. The national, I would say I would say national. It's the Cemetery Conservator standards. There's a list on their website, and you can see what the do's and the don'ts are. Our do's and don'ts are: don't go lean on gravestones, don't go push a gravestone over, don't see if it'll break or how powerful or strong this gravestone is. When people bend over, they underestimate the strength of these stones. You could grab one, they'll stand back up, it'll come down at you. So we tell people don't lean on the stones. That's pretty self-explanatory.
Especially old cemeteries, because like you said, they can fall down very easily, and not only could you damage a stone, but you're gonna definitely hurt yourself.
Yeah.
It's not a good time having a stone fall.
And if people want to clean gravestones, our methods are pretty simple. A nice rubber bristle brush that you can get at dollar stores. Use D2. It's a biological solution. There's no harmful chemicals. You'll do no damage to the stones. You won't stain the stones. That and water and a spray and a brush, and just scrub away and soak the stone afterwards, and it'll return as pristine as it ever was.
It'll keep lightening over time too. That's a great thing about D2 is it never stops doing its job. I would say maybe if you're gonna clean a stone, maybe try to go out maybe once a year and do it, because you'll notice throughout the year it's gonna get lighter and back to its, closer to its original state than when you started it.
And if people
actually,
have questions,
if I'm not mistaken, regular soap and water can actually hurt it, correct?
yes.
Yeah, that's why it's important to know like the standards and the guidelines, so you know what is safe to put on a stone, what's not safe. So that's why we'll always say just go right to D2, get some D2, get some water, and a bottle of D2 will go a long way. It really will. We've cleaned hundreds of gravestones, fixed hundreds of gravestones before we had to get another big bottle of it.
Chalk is bad. Markers, Sharpies, bad. Pencil, lead, that's bad. People do a lot of grave rubbings where they put a piece of paper over the gravestone and then they take a pencil and overlay it. That's harmful. That can destroy the inscriptions, and eventually water will be able to get in there and it'll start corroding the stone. Yeah, we could show the
Yeah,
process.
that would be amazing.
So when we approach gravestones, it's like this. If they're broken, so we'll take the whole stone off. We'll lay it flat. We'll reset the base. We'll level the base. Put sand, gravel underneath the base so it stabilizes, so it doesn't wobble. We level that off. We'll then put all the pieces together like a puzzle. We'll use an epoxy and a mortar in order to seal the holes. Stand them up. We'll put vice grips on the sides to stabilize it and to level it off so it doesn't top over or anything like that.
As well, like you see in the stone first one, there's a piece of wood.
And then you can see the grips on this one where that just holds the stone together so it doesn't slide. It'll stabilize it until it fully cures. We do the same thing on the bottom if the base is not stabilized, and we dug out. We re-level the stone, the bases on those stones, nice and upright. We clean all the pieces before we start epoxying.
Yeah, you can make sure you clean the fronts, the backs, in between. You want to make sure because what you're gonna do with the broken pieces, you're gonna epoxy them, and then once the epoxy cures, that's when you go back with the mortar or the Lithomex, depending on where you're repairing in the stone. Like the big crack that's in the middle, I used a Lithomex for that. And once I epoxied the base, I went back with mortar and I filled that in with mortar.
The process. That's the after. And that's the after when it's all done, nice and cured. Take the vice grips off, take the boards off the back to stabilize it. It stabilizes all by itself. That repair will last another 100 years, if not longer. Yeah.
That's you guys. I tell you, you guys are artists. I mean, I don't think just anybody could probably do that. But
you'd be surprised if someone's willing to learn. It's not that hard. I mean, you sit there, you listen to some music, and you're just gonna be patient, really, because like you said, it is an art. You don't want to have it look like a hack job either. You're definitely gonna take your time with it. But I feel like once you fix a couple stones, you'll start to get the hang of it. You'll speed up a little bit more. With the process as well. So
we recommend if people are looking to learn, we tell them look at your nearest historical society and ask them about cemetery conservation, and they should be able to point you in the right direction. If you can't find what you're looking for through that,
definitely check Facebook too.
Come to us and we'll try to help you out as best as we can. We'll point you in the right direction. Let us
know where you're from. We can see if we
can
dig around, find anybody, and see who's maybe local to you if you're having trouble finding anybody local to you that might get you involved in a group that is, allowed to do these things. I mean, before we started doing this, I wouldn't just go into a cemetery and, start digging around and fixing things because I didn't know what I was doing. Like I've always been attracted to cemeteries, but I didn't want to go in about it the wrong way, not know what I'm doing, potentially get arrested or, potentially cause more damage because I was not trained properly. It's not really, really hard to do. It's definitely, takes patience. It's time consuming, but it's not hard once you get into it. And I feel like most people, our volunteers at least, they go out there once and then they become addicted to it. It's really rewarding, and it's actually kind of therapeutic, to be honest, to sit there and repair a gravestone.
It's like drawing or building a puzzle.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. And that's exactly what I was going to ask you guys is how could people get involved? So thank you so much for answering that.
Absolutely.
Now, so I want to toot some horns here. Now, you guys have been mentioned in quite a few publications and things like that in you guys' area, correct?
Correct. I don't know how they find us, but it happens.
Yeah, local newspapers. We also try to reach out in other local communities, but our work usually our work usually speaks for itself. People are reaching out to us to go out and help them out and teach them some things. So yeah, that's awesome. It's great to be able to help somebody and point them in the right direction and maybe even learn something myself when I'm at it. You never know what you're going to be able to discover every day.
So much.
Well, and I completely agree, and I'm glad that you guys are getting recognized for again. I understand that you're doing it as a labor of love, but yeah, I'm glad other people are seeing that as well. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So what do you guys have coming up? Do you have any upcoming projects or something that you guys are going to be working on soon or just starting?
Yeah, so with repairs, we can only do epoxy is only good in 65-degree weather or higher.
Hmm.
So we still got some snow on the ground. So unfortunately, we can't go out there because the epoxy won't cure or the mortar won't cure properly, and it'll be more. All the work we would do right now it would be useless.
Hmm.
We aim for April, late March, and there's a couple cemeteries in Woonsocket that need work. We got other cemeteries in other states that we also want to get involved in. Um, it's just a matter of keeping up with what we have to do and what we plan on doing. And it's just accomplishing and completing projects that we've already started or we're working on or other people are doing that we like to get involved with and be able to help them put a dent in their project. Um, we we're all over the place. We help out so many different groups. We help out so many different organizations. So we try to balance it off and be very versatile in what we do. We could be doing stone repair one day and we go to brush cutting and cutting trees down the next day. So it depends on what day and what needs to be done.
Well, and it sounds like it's never the same thing over and over. It's
No.
always something different and always something interesting.
Yes.
Um, and speaking of interesting, and because you're on the Mother Delamort show, I have to ask, do you have any spooky tales or ghost stories you can tell us?
Yeah, I could tell you a local cemetery from Woonsocket. So the Elder Baloo Cemetery, it was a known spot for urban legend and ghost stories, ghost sightings. If people want to go on Google and search up Elder Baloo Cemetery, you'll see a lot of ghost stories and paranormal investigations that have taken place in this area. A lot of questionable things, a lot of UFO sightings as well. But one story is in the 1800s, there was a man they called Hot Shark Charlie, or they called him Freddy Fingernails. My perspective on it is that the movie Freddy Fingernails was the inspiration behind the story, the urban legend, the ghost story.
Mhm.
But kids in the neighborhood were very spiteful and would be very abusive to this man and his family to the point where one night they eventually burnt his house down with his wife and children inside.
Oh
Um,
my goodness.
this man coming to the rescue of his family was unfortunately not able to save the family, and in retaliation, he killed these boys and went on like a hunting spree in the woods. Um, it's said that his spirit haunts the woods behind Elder Baloo Cemetery, and you could see and feel his energy. Um, Unfortunately, I've never experienced any of that story. But it's a spooky story that is around here. Um, it's interesting.
When I was a teenager, I went ghost hunting in there with my mom and a couple friends, and I was using a Polaroid camera. And this is the only like weird thing I had from that particular cemetery. Um, all I was seeing was just green orbs flying around everywhere, and it scared me at the time because I was younger. Now I'm just like whatever, yeah, I'm used to it. But yeah, so I closed my eyes. I'm just snapping pictures. Every single one of my pictures, there was glowing green orbs in them, and there's no light. It's a dark road. Like there's nothing that would have caused
No swamp gas, anything like
that
that.
much. I don't think. I think I still have the Polaroids at my
Wow.
parents' house.
Yeah,
That
they're
that's
interesting.
that's pretty. I always love the picture evidence.
Yes.
I know a few years ago, me and a friend went down to New Orleans, and I love photography, and I had my old 35 millimeter and took just normal pictures, normal pictures. And this was in the day where you would take them and have them developed and give them back, like a week later. And it's always so much fun when you realize you caught something.
Yep.
Yes.
In
Yeah,
these
we
photos.
we stayed at the Lizzie Borden house last year, and I'm sitting in the basement of where Lizzie Borden was said to have been burning the axe that she had just killed her family with. So I'm sitting in this little cubby hole where this pot was. I'm sitting in there, and I'm all by myself, and I have my GoPro filming, and I have they're in the other room doing EVP sessions and whatnot. And I'm sitting in this little cubby, and I'm hearing what sounds like a hiss and a growl. I'm sitting there and I'm so convinced that I just heard this and my camera had caught this. I was shocked. I went from a skeptic to a believer real quick.
Yeah, he used to make fun of me for believing until we went to that.
and I go back home. We come back home and I turn this audio on to see what I got. And clear as day, you can hear a hiss and a growl, like a ha. And it's just, there's nobody else in the room besides myself. And just hearing that, and then watching Ghost Adventurers with Zach Baggins and whatnot, and seeing he had the same type of experience in that same room that I heard this hiss, and they caught a hiss. So it's not
babies crying and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's interesting
and
stuff.
I didn't notice until like months later because I went through the footage again. But when we're in the basement, which is where we get the most activity there, I actually caught a shadow figure, complete like outline of a man. He was leaning in the doorway. Me and Greg were on the stairs that lead down to the basement. We're just talking a little bit, trying to get some reactions out of Spirit. We walk back down the stairs, and I have it's pitch black because I'm just using my camera phone. Can't really see anything. Mm-hmm. But I move my phone when we both get back downstairs, and clear as day, you can see an outline of a man. Looks like he's just kind of like hanging out, leaning against the doorway. So it was pretty cool. We've got a couple really crazy different examples. A lot of audio, a lot of intelligent responses. I got to go through all that footage and get it edited somehow, so people aren't watching hours of footage, because we were recording the whole time. But we want to get all our evidence kind of laid out uniformly so people can actually sit there and enjoy it,
Oh, that would be amazing to see. And yes, experiences like that tend to change you from a skeptic to a believer really, really fast.
Yes, it does.
They really are life-changing too. I feel like, I don't know, I sense energy a lot. I always have. But after we left that house, we were both sick for a few days. And like, I don't know, my mind was just like, I was just like obsessed with that house. And I had to take like a month break from looking at my evidence because like it was giving me a headache. I was listening back to it, and I was literally getting like shivers down my spine, like I was back in the house. It's I don't know, it's just wild to go through all the evidence that we got.
I've heard that house is very active.
Extremely,
and I've heard that some places like that can have a physical effect on people, even a day or two later, because I guess I mean we could. Lord, I could go down so many rabbit holes and talk to you guys for like forever on this.
Right.
the whole, gathering of energy, and we're made of energy. So I can definitely understand how that can zap a lot out of a person, especially if you have some really active spirit that is actually manifesting itself strong enough to either move things or make noises or be seen. So yeah, I can definitely understand that.
Yes.
So I have to ask too, and again, I know we're kind of getting off subject, but again, we all seem to have kind of the same interests. And for our true crime buffs, can you tell us a little bit about some of the things that you guys have kind of been involved in? I know there's a particular situation or killer that was in you guys' kind of local area, wasn't there?
Yes.
Yep, Jeffrey Mallett.
Yeah, he's a known serial killer. I would call him a serial killer. He was dismembering bodies in his apartment, and he was a local. Everybody knew him. He was a good dude. Everybody was friends with him. He never gave anybody a problem. And he snapped.
I know somebody who had him in their wedding party, and they would have never expected it. Like nobody expected it.
But in his confession to the police when he was caught, he said he felt like something controlling him to continue these murders. It wasn't a satisfaction that he wanted to fulfill, but it was something that was taking over his mind, convincing him that he needed to keep doing this. And he thought he was really doing a justice by taking the females he took away from their families.
Of the night.
I don't want to disrespect any families. It's a sensitive topic, especially when it's from our hometown.
Right.
But there's some paranormal that is involved with that. He lived right across the street from an old Baptist cemetery that was built over with businesses. Maybe maybe the spirits, the deceased that were at rest at the cemetery, were no longer resting easy, and they were in like it could have been a purgatory for these spirits, and they were lost, and the only ones that they could grasp on were the most prone. And unfortunately, he was one of those people, the most prone, the closest one to that cemetery. And we did something. I did an interview with Sue from the Lizzie Borden tour guides, from the Lizzie Borden house. She was a tour guide when we stayed at the house, and she was absolutely fantastic. Then I started hearing her story and her experiences with the house, and even further than that, we became very friendly with them, and thankfully we became friends with them, and were able to teach them something about our area, and they were able to teach us something about their area. So it was a great time to be able to be a part of that in their video and what they were doing here. But there's so many different stories.
Well, I know you sent me some material last night to look at considering this gentleman, and that's one of the things, and I really enjoyed it, and I appreciate you guys sending it to me. But that was some of the things that were running through my mind, was that, first of all, if it had been some sort of, I guess, possession or nudging, maybe he already had tendencies to go that direction, and it was a nudge. It did seem to have some sort of, and again, I don't mean this by anything bad, but religious undertones. It did seem to have that. And then at the same time, it made me think a lot of like the nature versus nurture. And he seemed almost like a Bundy in a way, to where, from what I understood, there wasn't really anything that happened in his childhood that would have pushed him to something like this.
Nothing that we've ever heard of. And it's weird too, because he actually saved somebody's life that Greg's friends with.
Yeah, one of my friends.
And Bundy did the same thing.
Yes. I went from saving lives to killing lives. It's crazy. It's crazy. Maybe we'll never get it because we're not that. But maybe we can bring some closure to his side of things, because they are human beings as well. And in order to progress as human beings, we need to be able to understand these people in order to not lead more people down that path, and convince these people that this is a good thing that they're doing when it's not. Bundy was like that, and Bundy couldn't stop. And if the same thing in Woonsocket, if this guy was not caught, he would have kept going. There was no end.
Well, and the thing I think I found quite terrifying is some of the similarities that he had to Dahmer in a situation to where, not what they did, but that even Dahmer had like short periods of sanity. Like he knew what he was doing was wrong. Whereas you have a lot of these serial killers, whether they're narcissistic or sociopath or what have you, that really don't see any wrong in what they're doing. He seemed to have those same tendencies as Dahmer, to actually know what he was doing was wrong, but he couldn't stop himself.
It seems like at that point.
And that's a nightmare. Could you imagine?
Scary.
Yeah.
Very scary. And we're all capable of reaching that point. That's the scary thing.
Well, guys, I have so enjoyed having you guys here. And like I said, I could go on with you guys for forever. And I would really, if you guys are open to it, I'd really, really love to have you guys back sometime. Maybe when the season starts to wrap up for you guys.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Kind of update us on what's going on. But can you let everybody know where to find you guys? Like if they want to get in touch, if they want to reach out, have questions, or maybe they're in your local area.
Yeah, you can reach me at my name, Greg Duhamel, Facebook, Johnelle Bergeron, her Facebook. You got questions, we'll answer them as best as we can. You want to see the progress that we're doing in the cemeteries, Woonsocket, Rhode Island Cemetery volunteers will lead you right to us. I'm in the progress of setting up YouTube, so I'll have a channel to post in my own videos of all the work that we're doing throughout the season. But join the group. And you'll see all the updates and all the postings that we have in store for the season and the future.
If anybody ever has any questions, like I said earlier, feel free to reach out. We'd rather you come and ask, how to get involved, how to do things properly, than have you get into like this type of trouble, because laws are all different too, depending on the state. So it's definitely important to make sure you're going about it the right way.
Thank you. And yes, and I'm telling you, Johnelle and Greg are just some of the nicest people in the world. So yeah, reach out to them, even if it's just kudos, because I think that's kind of how we met, Greg, was
Yes.
I was like, oh my goodness, you do this. And I just want to tell you that I'm really grateful for what you guys are doing, and yada, 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 I'll babble on for hours. But.
Yep.
I know the deceased are grateful, but it is nice when we, get positive feedback from the living as well. Absolutely.
Well, you are definitely crypt friends for us here. And like I said, I do appreciate you guys joining us so much.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Tight for a minute. We're going to go ahead and run our ad and close up and say goodbye to our supporters. And I really do appreciate you guys being with us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Much.
Anytime.
Coming to you live from Psychomantium 13. Join us here throughout the week for all things in audio, visual, and literary content. You can also find us on the World Wide Web at psychomantium13.com. Join Psychomantium 13 and enter the weird.